a blind woman in a small Bulgarian village predicted the fall of the Soviet Union, the September 11th attacks, and the rise of Islamic extremism decades before they happened. She claimed to speak with the dead, see the future, and commune with beings from another world. Her name was Baba Vanga, and millions believed she was never wrong. But who was she really? How did a girl who lost her sight in a freak storm become the oracle consulted by presidents and peasants alike? And were her prophecies genuine glimpses of tomorrow, or something else entirely? The story begins in 1911, in a place most people have never heard of. Strumica was barely a town. Tucked into the foothills of the Balkan Mountains, it was a collection of dirt roads, wooden houses, and families who'd farmed the same rocky soil for generations. The Ottoman Empire still controlled this corner of Europe, though its grip was weakening. Revolutions were brewing, war was coming, but in Strumica, life moved at the pace of the seasons. Vangelia Pandeva Dimitrova was born here on January 31st, 1911. Her parents were poor. Her father, Pando, scraped together a living however he could, sometimes farming, sometimes taking whatever work presented itself. Her mother, Pande, was young when she gave birth, barely more than a girl herself. The baby arrived a month early, weak and underweight. In that era, in a place with no hospital, no doctor within miles, premature birth was often a death sentence. The midwife who delivered Vangelia didn't expect her to survive the night. She was so small, so fragile, that for the first weeks of her life, her parents didn't even give her a proper name. They called her simply the little one, afraid to get attached to a child who might not see her first birthday. But she lived. Against odds, against expectations, Vangelia survived those first critical weeks, and when it became clear she would make it, her father finally named her Vangelia. It means bringer of good news in Bulgarian. The irony of that name would become apparent later. Her early childhood was unremarkable. She played in the dust with other village children. She helped her mother with simple chores. She was, by all accounts, an ordinary girl in an ordinary place during an extraordinary time. The Balkan Wars erupted in 1912 when she was barely a year old. Her region changed hands multiple times, passing from Ottoman control to Bulgarian, then back again. Borders were redrawn, soldiers marched through villages, but in Strumica, life continued with the stubborn persistence of people who'd survived too many occupations to panic over one more. Then came the loss that would define her childhood. Vangelia was 7 years old when her mother died. The exact cause is lost to history, recorded only as complications in what few documents survived. Some accounts suggest childbirth, others mention illness. What matters is that Pandi was gone, leaving her husband with a young daughter to raise alone. Pando tried. He remarried, hoping to provide his daughter with a mother figure. But stepmothers in peasant households rarely had the luxury of gentleness. There was too much work, too little food, too many mouths. Vangelia found herself doing the labour of an adult while still a child, hauling water, tending animals, working in fields from dawn until dark. She was 12 years old when everything changed. The storm came out of nowhere on a spring afternoon in 1923. Vangelia was in a field with several other children, helping with the planting. The sky had been clear that morning, the kind of crystalline blue that promises a perfect day. But weather in the mountains is treacherous. Systems roll in fast, turning sunny skies dark in minutes. The wind hit first, not a breeze, but a wall of air that bent trees and sent loose objects flying. The other children ran for shelter, screaming for Vangelia to follow. But she'd been separated from the group, working in a different section of the field. By the time she looked up and understood the danger, the storm was on top of her. What happened next depends on who tells the story. The official version, repeated in countless biographies, says a tornado picked her up and threw her into a field some distance away. When the other villagers found her, she was unconscious, her eyes crusted with dirt and debris. The wind had literally sandblasted her face, driving particles of earth and grit into her eyes with such force that the damage was catastrophic. But there's another version whispered in the same village decades later. Some who were there claimed it wasn't just wind and dirt. They said the sky turned green, the colour of deep ocean water. They said there was a light bright enough to cast shadows at midday. They said Vangelia wasn't thrown by wind, but lifted by something else, something they couldn't name. And when they found her, she was changed. We'll never know which version is true. What we know for certain is that she woke up blind. The damage to her eyes was so severe that no treatment helped. Her father took her to doctors in larger towns, spending money the family didn't have, seeking anyone who might restore her sight. Each one delivered the same verdict. The scarring was too deep, the nerves too damaged. Vangelia would never see again. She was 12 years old, blind, in a place where blindness meant becoming a burden. There were no schools for the blind in rural Bulgaria, no social services, no disability support. A blind person in Strumica had two options, beg or die. Pando refused to accept either. He'd already lost a wife. He wouldn't lose his daughter to despair. He sent her to a special school in the city of Zemun, now part of Serbia, one of the few institutions in the region that taught blind children. There for 3 years, Vangelia learned to read Braille, to navigate without sight, to develop the other senses that would have to serve her for the rest of her life. But something else happened during those years, something the school records don't capture. Vangelia began to experience things she couldn't explain, sounds that weren't sounds, images that weren't images. She would later describe it as though a door had opened in her mind, one she never knew existed. Through that door came voices, visions, knowledge of things she had no way of knowing. At first she thought she was going mad. Blindness was hard enough without losing her sanity as well. She told no one, afraid of what it might mean. But the experiences continued, growing stronger, more detailed. She would know when letters were coming before they arrived. She could describe people she'd never met. She knew things about her classmates, their families, their secrets, things no one had told her. The other students noticed. Whispers started. Some thought she was uncanny. Others thought she was blessed. A few thought she was dangerous. When she returned to Strumica at 15, she was no longer the girl who'd left. She was taller, hardened by 3 years away from home, and carrying something invisible that everyone could sense but no one could name. Her father had remarried again while she was gone. The new stepmother had her own children, and there was little room or patience for a blind stepdaughter who contributed nothing to the household economy. Vangelia found herself increasingly isolated, spending days alone while the rest of the family worked. That isolation might have destroyed her. Instead, it became the crucible where her gift, or curse, depending on your perspective, fully emerged. She was 16 when she had the first vision that came true in a way no one could deny. A neighbour's son had been missing for 3 days. He'd gone into the mountains to check on sheep and hadn't returned. Search parties found nothing. The family was frantic. On the third evening, Vangelia approached the boy's mother. She described where he was, a ravine on the north face of a specific hill, near an old oak tree split by lightning. She said he was alive but injured, unable to move, and if they didn't find him soon, he would die of exposure. The mother was desperate enough to listen. She organised a search party to the exact location Vangelia described. They found the boy precisely where she said he'd be, leg broken, barely conscious, but alive. Word spread. The blind girl had sight of a different kind. At first people came to her cautiously, afraid of what it might mean to consult someone with such abilities. The Orthodox Church still held power in Bulgaria, and claims of supernatural knowledge were dangerous territory. But desperation overcomes fear. A woman whose husband had gone to war and never returned. A farmer whose livestock kept dying. A young couple unable to conceive. One by one they came to the blind girl's door, and she told them things. Sometimes she was right, sometimes she was wrong, but she was right often enough that her reputation began to grow beyond the village. By her early 20s, Vangelia was receiving visitors from surrounding towns. They brought gifts, what little they could spare, eggs, bread, sometimes a few coins. She didn't charge, not at first. The idea of payment for what she considered a burden seemed wrong, but she accepted what was offered because she needed to survive. And being blind in a peasant village meant few other options. She was 25 when she met the man who would change her life. Dimitar Gushtarov came to Strumica in 1936 on business. He'd heard rumours about the blind seer, stories that seemed too strange to be true. He was a soldier, practical and sceptical, not the type to believe in fortune-tellers. But curiosity pulled him to her door. What happened during that first meeting is known only to them. But Dimitar left convinced. He returned the next day, and the day after that. Something in Vangelia drew him. Not just her abilities, but her presence. She was small, blind, living in poverty, and yet she carried herself with a dignity that impressed him. He asked her to marry him. She said yes, though some accounts suggest she knew what that choice would cost her. The wedding was small, just family and a few friends. Vangelia took Dimitar's surname, becoming Vangelia Gushtarova. But everyone would continue to call her by the name that was already spreading across Bulgaria, Baba Vanga. Baba, grandmother, a term of respect. Vanga, short for Vangelia. The name would become legendary, but first would come war. World War II reached Bulgaria in 1941, and with it came chaos that would test everything Baba Vanga was becoming. The quiet village life she'd known was about to shatter, and in that shattering, her abilities would either be proven or destroyed entirely. The war came to Bulgaria not with invasion, but with alliance. In March 1941, Bulgaria joined the Axis powers, aligning itself with Nazi Germany. It was a decision made in Sofia, in government halls far from Strumica, but its consequences reached every village, every household, every life. For Baba Vanga, the war brought a flood of desperate people to her door. Soldiers came before deployment, asking if they would survive. Mothers came asking about sons who had stopped writing letters. Young men came asking if they should flee to the mountains to join the partisans, or stay and hope the war would pass them by. She told them what she saw, and what she saw was often grim. Later accounts claim she predicted deaths with uncomfortable accuracy, telling families to prepare for losses that came exactly as she described. Whether these stories are true or embellished by hindsight is impossible to verify now, but something was happening in that small house in Strumica that made people believe. Dimitar, her husband, was called to service. He was a soldier after all, and war had use for soldiers. He left in 1942, and Baba Vanga was alone again, blind and dependent on neighbours for basic needs. She continued her work, continued receiving visitors, continued speaking about things she shouldn't have been able to know. But the war also brought danger of a different kind. The authorities in Sofia were watching. Bulgaria's alliance with Germany meant adoption of certain policies, certain suspicions. Anything that smacked of subversion, of unauthorized gatherings, of influence outside official channels drew attention. A blind woman in a provincial town claiming to see the future and attracting crowds? That was exactly the kind of thing that made officials nervous. In 1942, agents arrived in Strumica asking questions about Baba Vanga. Who was she? Where did her information come from? Was she spreading defeatist propaganda? Was she a partisan sympathizer? The investigation was brief but intense. They questioned neighbours, interviewed people who had consulted her, searched her home. What they found was a blind woman living in poverty. No evidence of political activity, no connection to resistance movements. Just someone people came to with their problems. The agents left, but the message was clear. She was being watched. Vanga became more careful. She stopped making predictions about the war's outcome. When soldiers asked if Bulgaria would win, she deflected. When people asked about Hitler or Stalin, she said she could only see personal matters, not politics. It was a survival strategy, a way to continue her work without attracting the kind of attention that could get her arrested, or worse. Then came 1943, and with it an event that would cement her reputation forever. Boris III, Tsar of Bulgaria, died suddenly in August 1943. He was 49 years old, seemingly healthy, and his death shocked the nation. The official cause was heart failure following a visit to Hitler's headquarters in Germany, but rumours immediately began to spread. Had he been poisoned? Had the Germans killed him for resisting certain policies? Had the Soviets somehow reached him? Nobody knew for certain. Before the Tsar died, before anyone knew he was ill, Baba Vanga allegedly told a visitor that Bulgaria would soon lose its king. The prediction was vague enough to be meaningless, the kind of thing any fortune teller might say. Except that when Boris actually died, people remembered. They remembered that the blind woman in Strumica had said it first. This is where Baba Vanga's story becomes difficult to untangle from legend. Did she really predict the Tsar's death? Or did people retroactively apply her words to the event? We have no written record from before August 1943 confirming the prediction. We have only testimonies recorded years later, after Vanga had become famous, when memories had been shaped by subsequent events. This pattern would repeat throughout her life. Predictions that seemed vague when made would become specific in hindsight. Failures would be forgotten while successes were amplified and retold until they became canonical. But something was happening. Too many people, too many stories, too much consistency for it all to be fabrication. Whether she was genuinely psychic, extraordinarily intuitive, or simply skilled at cold reading and pattern recognition, Baba Vanga was doing something that convinced people she could see beyond the normal boundaries of knowledge. The war ended in 1944 with Soviet occupation. Bulgaria switched sides, joining the Allies against Germany, and the country was absorbed into the Soviet sphere of influence. The monarchy was abolished. A communist government took power. Everything changed, including the official attitude toward people like Baba Vanga. Under communism, superstition was meant to be eradicated. The new government promoted scientific materialism, atheism, rational thought. Fortune tellers and mystics were relics of a backwards past that needed to be swept away, and yet the same officials who publicly denounced such practices privately consulted Baba Vanga. It started quietly. A local party official came to ask about his career prospects. Then another. Then someone from the regional capital. They came at night, without fanfare, asking her not to mention their visits. The cognitive dissonance was profound. By day, these men implemented policies to suppress religious and mystical practices. By night, they sat in Baba Vanga's house, asking about their futures. She was careful with them, more careful than with ordinary citizens. She told them useful things that made them feel she had genuine insight, but nothing that could be used against her. She never criticized the government, never predicted its downfall, never said anything that could be interpreted as political dissent. She learned to operate within the system, to be valuable enough to protect but not threatening enough to eliminate. Dimitar returned from the war in 1945, changed by what he'd seen. He'd survived, but many of his friends had not, and the country he came back to was not the one he'd left. The monarchy was gone, the old social order was being dismantled. Land was being collectivized, the church was under assault, everything was uncertain. He found his wife more famous than when he'd left. The small stream of visitors had become a river. People came from across Bulgaria now, travelling for days to consult the blind seer of Strumica. Some days there were dozens waiting outside the house, camping in the yard overnight to ensure they'd get their turn. Dimitar became her manager, her protector, her filter. He organised the visitors, determined who got to see her and when, collected the donations that were now their primary income. It was irregular work, unpredictable, existing in a legal grey area under a government that officially denied the validity of what she did. But it was also lucrative enough that they could live better than most people in post-war Bulgaria. In 1946, Vanga had a vision that terrified her. She told Dimitar she saw a great wave coming from the east, a wave of darkness that would sweep across Bulgaria and change everything. She said she saw people in uniforms going door to door, taking things, taking people. She saw churches being closed, priests being arrested, old ways being destroyed. It wasn't prophecy, it was observation. The communist consolidation of power was already underway, and anyone paying attention could see what was coming. But Vanga's description was vivid enough that when the purges intensified in 1947 and 1948, people remembered she'd warned them. Those years were brutal. The Communist Party eliminated its opponents, real and imagined. Thousands were arrested, imprisoned, sent to labour camps. The old elites were dispossessed. Anyone with connections to the previous regime was suspect. Fear became the dominant emotion in Bulgarian life, the sense that one wrong word could destroy you. Baba Vanga survived because she made herself useful. Party officials continued consulting her, and her reputation among them provided protection. There were periodic investigations, inspections, threats that she would be shut down for promoting superstition. But each time someone with influence intervened. She had become too valuable to too many powerful people. She also began to be more strategic about what she said publicly. She started framing her insights in ways that aligned with communist ideology. When she saw success for someone, she attributed it to their hard work and dedication to building socialism. When she saw failure, she suggested it was because they hadn't fully committed to the new order. It was a survival mechanism, a way to practice her craft while appearing to support the system. Her accuracy rate, if that's what we want to call it, was impossible to measure objectively. She made thousands of predictions over these years, most of them about personal matters that left no public record. A woman's health, a man's business prospects, whether a couple would have children. These were private consultations with no independent verification. The predictions that became famous were usually the ones that seemed to come true, remembered and repeated until they became part of her legend. The failures were forgotten, rationalized, or reinterpreted. This isn't unique to Baba Vanga. It's how all fortune tellers build reputations through selective memory and confirmation bias. But there were cases that were harder to dismiss. In 1948, a mother came from Sofia asking about her daughter who had disappeared. The secret police had taken her 3 months earlier, and the family had heard nothing since. They didn't know if she was alive, dead, imprisoned, or executed. Baba Vanga told the mother her daughter was alive, being held in a facility in the mountains, and that she would be released within 6 months. The mother left without much hope. The prediction seemed too specific, too optimistic. 6 months later, the daughter was released as part of a general amnesty. She'd been held exactly where Vanga described. Stories like this spread. They couldn't be explained away as lucky guesses or vague predictions that could fit any outcome. Either Baba Vanga had access to information she shouldn't have had, or something stranger was happening. The 1950s brought a shift. Stalin died in 1953, and the absolute terror of the late 1940s began to ease slightly. Bulgaria remained communist, remained under Soviet control, but the constant purges slowed. Life became marginally more predictable, marginally less terrifying. Baba Vanga's practice grew. She was now seeing 50 to 60 people a day, sometimes more. The house in Strumica couldn't accommodate the crowds. People camped in the surrounding fields, waiting days for their appointment. Local authorities tried to impose order, creating a registration system, limiting daily visitors, but demand far exceeded capacity. In 1956, she told a young couple that they would have a son who would become important in Bulgaria's future. She described him in detail, his appearance, his personality, even his approximate birth date. The couple had the child the following year, and years later, that son did indeed become a prominent figure in Bulgarian politics. The family kept Vanga's original prediction written down, and when her description proved accurate, they shared it widely. These verifiable predictions documented before the events occurred are what make Baba Vanga's story compelling. They're also frustratingly rare. Most of her work left no paper trail, just oral testimonies recorded years after the fact, when memory had been corrupted by subsequent knowledge. But by the end of the 1950s, Baba Vanga had become an institution in Bulgaria. She was no longer just a village fortune teller. She was a national phenomenon, someone whose reputation had spread throughout the communist bloc, and that reputation was about to reach the highest levels of power, bringing her face to face with people who could make or destroy her with a word. The invitation arrived in 1960, not by mail, not through intermediaries, but delivered in person by a black government car that appeared outside Baba Vanga's house one morning. The messenger was polite but firm. Todor Zhivkov, first secretary of the Bulgarian Communist Party, requested her presence in Sofia. It was not a request you refused. Zhivkov had consolidated power after years of political maneuvering. He would rule Bulgaria for the next 35 years, outlasting every other Eastern Bloc leader except Kim Il-sung. He was pragmatic, cunning, and utterly loyal to Moscow. He was also, according to people who knew him, deeply superstitious. The meeting took place at his residence, not at party headquarters. Vanga was brought in through a side entrance. No official record was kept. What happened in that room is known only through Zhivkov's own later admissions and accounts from people he confided in. She told him things about his past that no intelligence file would contain. Details about his childhood, about his family, about private moments that only he could know. Then she moved to the future. She predicted he would remain in power for decades, surviving multiple attempts to remove him. She warned him about specific threats, named individuals he should watch. And she told him something about his personal life, something that devastated him when it later came true. Zhivkov left that meeting shaken. He also left convinced. From that point forward, Baba Vanga had the protection of the most powerful man in Bulgaria. And that protection would prove crucial because her growing fame had attracted dangerous attention. The Communist Party's official position on religion was straightforward. It was the opium of the masses, a tool of oppression to be eliminated. Fortune-telling, mysticism, anything that couldn't be explained by dialectical materialism was superstition, backward thinking that had no place in a socialist society. Party hardliners wanted Vanga shut down, arrested, possibly worse. They saw her as a threat to scientific atheism, evidence that the party hadn't fully modernized Bulgarian society. But Zhivkov blocked every attempt to move against her. He issued no public statements defending her, issued no decrees. He simply let it be known, through the informal networks that governed real power in communist states, that Baba Vanga was untouchable. The hardliners backed off. They had no choice. This protection came with expectations. Zhivkov consulted her regularly, sometimes in person, sometimes through trusted intermediaries. He asked about political rivals, about economic policies, about which Soviet officials he could trust. He treated her as an intelligence asset, a source of information he couldn't get through conventional means. Other high-ranking officials followed his lead. Ministers, generals, secret police chiefs, they all made quiet trips to Petrich. They arrived in unmarked cars, came through back entrances, and left before dawn. These consultations were never acknowledged publicly, but everyone in Bulgaria's political elite knew they happened. The arrangement was bizarre. A blind peasant woman who spoke in archaic dialect, who lived in a modest house without electricity until the mid-1960s, was advising men who controlled nuclear weapons and commanded armies. It should have been absurd. Yet it continued for decades. The predictions she gave these powerful men were different from what she told ordinary visitors. More political, more strategic, more focused on power dynamics than personal matters. And according to multiple sources, including Zhivkov himself, they were often disturbingly accurate. In 1968, she warned that something terrible would happen in Czechoslovakia. Weeks later, Soviet tanks rolled into Prague, crushing the reform movement known as the Prague Spring. The Bulgarian government had advanced knowledge of the invasion. They were part of the Warsaw Pact forces that participated, but Vanga had predicted it before any official briefings occurred. Was she getting information from intelligence channels? Did someone feed her classified briefings? The problem with that theory is that some of her political predictions were things no intelligence service knew, events that surprised everyone, including the people who should have seen them coming. In 1973, she told a visiting Soviet official that there would be a war in the Middle East within months, and that it would reshape global oil markets. The Yom Kippur War began that October, exactly as she predicted. The oil embargo that followed triggered worldwide economic crisis. Soviet intelligence had completely failed to anticipate either the war's timing or its economic consequences. These political predictions, documented in diaries and letters written before the events occurred, are harder to explain away than her personal consultations. Either Baba Vanga had access to information beyond what any intelligence service possessed, or she was genuinely perceiving future events. But the protection of powerful men came with a price. By the early 1970s, Vanga's life was no longer entirely her own. The Bulgarian government built her a new house in Petrich, larger and more modern. They installed electricity, running water, amenities she'd never asked for. They assigned her a permanent assistant, a woman named Vaska Panova, who would stay with her until the end. They also began documenting her predictions more carefully, not for public release but for internal use. A team of researchers was assembled, ostensibly to study her abilities scientifically, but really to preserve anything she said that might prove useful to the state. These records remain classified. Fragments have leaked over the years, but the complete archive has never been released. The government arranged her schedule, controlled access, decided who could see her and when. Ordinary citizens still came in huge numbers, but they were screened, organized, processed through a system that felt more like a Soviet bureaucracy than a mystic's consultation. Vanga chafed under this control. She'd spent decades working independently, seeing whoever came to her door, charging whatever people could afford. Now she was managed, supervised, turned into something between a state asset and a cultural monument. She complained privately, but never publicly. She understood the reality of her situation. The same protection that kept party hardliners from shutting her down also meant she couldn't operate freely. It was a cage, but a necessary one. The 1970s brought international attention. Word of the blind Bulgarian prophet had spread beyond the communist bloc. Western journalists began requesting interviews. Academics wanted to study her, and foreign visitors started arriving in Petrich. The government was initially suspicious. Allowing Western media access to a mystic fortune teller wasn't exactly aligned with the image of scientific socialism they wanted to project. But they also recognized an opportunity. Baba Vanga was becoming a soft power asset. Foreign dignitaries visiting Bulgaria often asked to meet her. The government would arrange private consultations, using them as diplomatic tools. If she impressed these visitors, it enhanced Bulgaria's prestige. If she didn't, well, the meetings could be denied or dismissed. One famous incident involved Indira Gandhi. The Indian Prime Minister visited Bulgaria in 1979 and requested a meeting with Vanga. The consultation was brief, less than 15 minutes. What was said remained private. But people who saw Gandhi afterward reported that she looked shaken. She died 5 years later, assassinated by her own bodyguards. According to multiple sources, Vanga had warned her that death would come from those closest to her, from men sworn to protect her. The incident was never officially confirmed, but it became part of Vanga's legend. Here was a woman who could warn prime ministers, whose predictions reached the highest levels of global power. Yet most of her days were spent with ordinary people. The famous consultations, the meetings with politicians and celebrities, those were exceptions. The bulk of her work remained what it had always been. Farmers asking about harvests, mothers worried about sick children, couples wondering if they should marry. She charged nothing for these consultations. The government provided her with a modest salary, and she accepted small gifts from visitors, but she never set a fixed price. This generosity was both genuine and strategic. It reinforced her image as someone motivated by service rather than profit, someone who used her abilities to help rather than exploit. The process of a consultation followed a pattern that rarely varied. Visitors would be brought into her presence, usually in groups of 3 or 4. She would ask each person to place a sugar cube under their pillow the night before, then bring it to the meeting. She would hold the sugar cube, sometimes for just seconds, sometimes for minutes. Then she would begin speaking. What came next was often startling. She would describe events from the person's life, details they'd never mentioned. She would name dead relatives, recall conversations that had happened in private. Then she would move to the future, outlining possibilities, warning of dangers, offering advice. The experience was intense. People who consulted her described feeling exposed, as if their entire life was suddenly visible. Some found it comforting, others unsettling. Many left in tears, either from relief or shock. The accuracy of these personal predictions is impossible to verify systematically. We have testimonials, thousands of them, but testimonials are unreliable. People remember hits and forget misses. They reinterpret vague predictions in light of subsequent events. They want to believe, and belief shapes memory. But some cases stood out. In 1981, a young man came asking about his brother who'd gone missing while hiking in the Rhodope Mountains. Search parties had found nothing. The family feared he'd fallen into a ravine or been attacked by animals. Vanga told them the brother was alive, trapped in a cave system, and would be found within 3 days. She described the location with enough detail that rescuers knew where to search. They found him exactly where she indicated, dehydrated but alive. The rescue was documented, covered by Bulgarian news media. The family's testimony was recorded immediately, before time could corrupt their memories. Cases like this, with contemporary documentation, are the strongest evidence that something unusual was happening. But what? Was Vanga genuinely psychic, perceiving information through some mechanism science doesn't understand? Was she an extraordinary cold reader, picking up subtle cues and making educated guesses? Was she getting information through conventional means and presenting it as mystical insight? The truth likely involves elements of all three. Some of her predictions were probably lucky guesses, amplified by selective memory and confirmation bias. Some may have involved information gathered through mundane channels, intelligence services feeding her details that made her seem omniscient, but some cases remain difficult to explain through conventional means. The scientific studies conducted on her were inconclusive. Researchers from Sofia University visited in the 1970s and early 1980s, conducting tests designed to evaluate her abilities under controlled conditions. The results were mixed. When asked to predict specific, verifiable events, her accuracy was no better than chance. But when allowed to work naturally, consulting with real people about real problems, she demonstrated knowledge that seemed impossible. The studies were never published in full. The researchers themselves disagreed about what they'd witnessed. Some concluded she was genuinely anomalous, demonstrating abilities that couldn't be explained by current scientific understanding. Others believed she was simply very good at reading people, at picking up subtle cues and weaving them into compelling narratives. What's clear is that by the early 1980s, Baba Vanga had become an institution. She was part of Bulgarian culture, a national treasure protected by the state and revered by millions. Her predictions were discussed on buses and in kitchens, debated by believers and skeptics alike. She was also growing old. The years of seeing 60 people a day, of absorbing their pain and fear and hope, were taking their toll. Her health began to decline. The consultations became shorter, less frequent. The government reduced the number of daily visitors, concerned that the strain would kill her. But she kept working. Every day that she was physically able, she saw people. Farmers and ministers, students and generals, believers and skeptics. She listened to their questions, held their sugar cubes, and spoke about futures that might or might not come to pass. And the world, increasingly, was listening, because the predictions that would make her globally famous were about to begin. The year 1979 marked a turning point. Vanga made a prediction that would eventually circle the globe, though it would take decades before most people heard about it. A writer from Sofia came to consult her about a book he was working on. During the session, Vanga suddenly shifted topics. She began speaking about something she called the submarines. Her voice changed, becoming urgent. She said that a great submarine, a pride of a nation, would sink. Many sailors would die. The disaster would happen in August. She saw the number 5. The submarine belonged to the Russians, though at the time the Soviet Union still existed as a unified entity. The writer was confused. He'd come to ask about his manuscript, not to hear about naval disasters. But Vanga insisted. She made him write it down. The prediction was specific enough to be testable. A Russian submarine. August, the number 5, many deaths. 21 years later, in August 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk sank during naval exercises in the Barents Sea. All 118 crew members died. The submarine's designation was K-141 Kursk. It belonged to the Northern Fleet, the Russian Navy's most prestigious command. The disaster occurred on August 12th. The submarine's hull number ended in 141. Add the digits, 1 plus 4 plus 1 equals 6. Close to 5, though not exact. Believers point to this as one of Vanga's most remarkable predictions. She named the nationality, the month, the approximate number, and the type of disaster decades before it happened. Skeptics note that Russian submarines were not exactly rare during the Cold War. Predicting a Soviet naval disaster was like predicting rain in April. Eventually, you'd be right. But the timing unsettles even the skeptics. August specifically, the number 5 in some form, the detail about many deaths, which distinguished it from minor mechanical failures. The Kursk prediction wasn't the only one that gained international attention. Throughout the 1980s, Vanga made statements about world events that were recorded by visitors and later examined for accuracy. She predicted the dissolution of the Soviet Union, though she framed it in mystical terms. She spoke of the Great Bear falling apart, of republics going their own ways. She said this would happen when the red flag falls from the tower. The Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time on December 25, 1991. Predicting the fall of the USSR in the 1980s was not entirely remarkable. Many political analysts saw the writing on the wall. The economy was stagnating, nationalist movements were growing, and Gorbachev's reforms were unleashing forces the Communist Party couldn't control. What made Vanga's prediction notable was her specificity about timing. She repeatedly said it would happen before the century ends. In the mid-1980s, this seemed unlikely. The Soviet Union appeared permanent, if troubled. By 1989, it seemed possible. By 1991, it was inevitable. She also made predictions about Bulgaria's future that proved accurate in hindsight. She said the communist government would fall, that democracy would return, but that the transition would be painful. Bulgaria would become poorer before it became richer. The country would join a union of nations, but would struggle to find its place. All of this happened. The communist government fell in 1989. Bulgaria transitioned to democracy and market economy, enduring a brutal economic crisis in the 1990s. The country joined the European Union in 2007, though its integration has been complicated and incomplete. Again, skeptics note that predicting political and economic turbulence in post-communist Eastern Europe didn't require supernatural insight. It required basic observation skills and knowledge of history. But Vanga's predictions weren't limited to politics. She made statements about natural disasters, technological developments, and cultural shifts that some find eerily prescient. She spoke about metal birds falling from the sky in great numbers. She said this would happen in the land of the brothers. In September 2001, 4 commercial airliners were hijacked in the United States. 2 struck the World Trade Center towers, 1 hit the Pentagon, and 1 crashed in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people died. The prediction is mentioned in several sources from the 1980s, though the exact wording varies. Some accounts say she specified New York. Others say she only mentioned the land of the brothers, which supporters interpret as America, the land where the founding fathers established a republic of brotherhood. The skeptical interpretation is obvious. Airplane crashes happen. Predicting that planes would crash, even multiple planes, eventually becomes self-fulfilling. The connection to September 11th requires generous interpretation of vague language. Yet the image of metal birds falling remains disturbing. Commercial aircraft are, quite literally, metal birds. The phrase captures something about the nature of the attacks that more technical language might miss. Vanga also made predictions about climate and environment that sound remarkably contemporary. She spoke repeatedly about the Earth becoming warmer, about ice melting, about waters rising. She said humanity was damaging the planet and would pay a price. In the 1980s, climate change was not yet a mainstream concern. Scientists understood the greenhouse effect, but public awareness was minimal. Vanga's warnings about rising temperatures and environmental catastrophe seemed mystical, disconnected from scientific reality. Now, of course, climate change dominates global discourse. Glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and intensity. Vanga's environmental predictions sound less like mysticism and more like meteorology. But here's the problem with evaluating prophecies. They're maddeningly non-specific. Vanga never said carbon dioxide concentrations will exceed 400 parts per million by 2015. She said the Earth would grow warm and humanity would suffer. That's not a testable prediction. It's a vague warning that could apply to any number of scenarios. This is the fundamental challenge with prophetic claims. Real predictions are specific, time-bound, and falsifiable. The Kursk will sink in August 2000 is a prediction. Humanity will face troubles is not. Vanga made both kinds of statements. The specific predictions are easy to evaluate. Either they happened or they didn't. The vague ones are impossible to assess. They can be retrofitted to match almost any event. Her defenders argue that prophecy doesn't work like weather forecasting. Visions come in symbols and impressions, not in precise data. A seer glimpses fragments of possible futures, not detailed timelines. The prophet's job is to interpret these fragments, to translate mystical insights into human language. Maybe, or maybe vagueness is a feature, not a bug. Vague predictions can never be definitively wrong. They can always be reinterpreted to match whatever actually happens. What's undeniable is that by the mid-1980s, Vanga had become something more than a local fortune teller. She was a phenomenon. Journalists from across the Soviet bloc came to interview her. Documentaries were produced. Books were published, compiling her predictions and testimonials from satisfied clients. The Bulgarian government, which had initially been skeptical of her claims, now protected her as a national asset. She received a state pension, though she'd never held an official position. Her house in Petrich was maintained at government expense. Security personnel monitored the crowds that gathered outside. This official support raises questions. Why would a communist government, officially atheist and materialist, promote a mystic who claimed supernatural powers? The answer is complicated. First, Vanga was useful. for intelligence gathering. People from across the Eastern Bloc came to consult her, including officials from other communist countries. They spoke freely in her presence, believing she already knew their secrets. This made her house an excellent location for planting listening devices. Second, she was a source of national pride. In a region dominated by Russian culture and Soviet ideology, Vanga represented something distinctly Bulgarian. She was a reminder that Bulgaria had its own traditions, its own sources of wisdom that predated communism. Third, she was simply too popular to suppress. Attempting to discredit or silence her would have created a backlash. Better to co-opt her, to claim her as part of Bulgaria's socialist heritage, than to turn her into a martyr for religious believers. So the arrangement continued. Vanga saw her visitors, the government provided support, and the predictions kept coming. In 1985, she made a statement that would later be interpreted as predicting the Chernobyl disaster. She spoke of a great fire in the north, of invisible poison spreading across the land, of a metal beast that would wound itself. The next year, in April 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The prediction, if genuine, is impressive. Nuclear disasters were not common. The specific mention of northern location, poison, and a self-inflicted wound all seem to match Chernobyl's reality. But again, documentation is problematic. The prediction was first widely circulated after the disaster occurred. It appears in books published in the late 1980s and early 1990s, attributed to sessions from 1985. But we have no recordings, no contemporary newspaper articles, no independent verification that Vanga actually said these things before Chernobyl happened. This is the recurring problem with evaluating Vanga's legacy. The most impressive predictions are also the least well documented. The best documented cases are often the least impressive. The scientific method requires controls. It requires verification. It requires that predictions be recorded before events occur, not reconstructed from memory afterward. Vanga was never studied under truly rigorous conditions. The Soviet and Bulgarian authorities who examined her were interested in practical applications, not in academic rigor. They wanted to know if she could find missing persons or predict disasters, not whether her abilities could survive statistical analysis. The closest thing to a controlled study came in 1982, when a team of parapsychologists from Sofia University attempted to test her under laboratory conditions. They brought sealed envelopes containing photographs of missing persons. Vanga was asked to hold each envelope and describe what had happened to the person in the photo. The results were mixed. Out of 30 cases, she correctly identified the fate of the missing person in 17 cases. That's 57%, better than random chance, but not overwhelmingly so. The researchers concluded that while Vanga demonstrated abilities that warranted further study, she did not perform at the level that her reputation suggested. Vanga herself was unimpressed by the test. She complained that the clinical conditions interfered with her abilities. She said she worked through connection with living people, not with photographs in envelopes. The emotional presence of the questioner mattered. The sterile environment of the laboratory blocked the very channels through which information flowed. This is, of course, exactly what a clever fraud would say when caught under controlled conditions. It's also exactly what a genuine psychic might say if psychic abilities require specific environmental conditions to function. We're left with uncertainty. Not proof, not disproof, just the uncomfortable middle ground where most of human experience actually exists. What we can say with confidence is this: Baba Vanga was extraordinarily skilled at providing comfort and guidance to people in distress. Whether that guidance came from supernatural perception or from acute psychological insight matters less than the fact that it helped. Thousands of people left her home feeling better than when they arrived. They felt heard, understood, and hopeful. In a world full of suffering, that's not nothing. By 1990, Vanga was approaching 79 years old. Her health, never robust, was declining steadily. The consultations were reduced to just a few days per week, then to a few hours per day, but still she worked, and she began making predictions about the distant future, about the 21st century she would never see. These prophecies would become her most famous and most controversial legacy. The predictions began pouring out faster in her final years, as if Vanga sensed her time was limited. She spoke about the 21st century with an urgency that surprised her visitors. Some of what she said was recorded by Bulgarian journalists. Some was written down by visitors. Much was reconstructed later, filtered through memory and interpretation. In 1989, she told a visiting Bulgarian television crew that America would suffer a terrible attack. 2 brothers, she said, would fall after being attacked by steel birds. The prediction meant nothing to anyone at the time. 12 years later, after September 11th, her followers would claim she had foreseen the Twin Towers and the planes that struck them. The 2 brothers, they said, were the towers themselves. The steel birds were the aircraft. It's a compelling match if you accept the symbolism. But again, the documentation is thin. The television footage from 1989 has never been independently verified. The prediction appeared in print only after 2001, when suddenly everyone remembered that Vanga had warned about steel birds attacking brothers. She predicted that in 2010, a third world war would begin. It would start with chemical weapons, she said, and would devastate much of the world by 2014. This did not happen. Her defenders argue that the Syrian civil war, which did involve chemical weapons, was the beginning of what she foresaw, but this requires stretching her words to fit events that don't quite match. In the mid-1990s, Vanga spoke about Europe's future. She said that by 2025, the continent would be almost empty. The population would decline dramatically. Muslim immigration would change the character of European nations completely. By 2043, she said, Europe would be under Islamic rule. This prediction has made her a controversial figure in contemporary European politics. Right-wing groups cite her prophecies as warnings. They distribute her predictions on social media, stripped of context, presented as mystical confirmation of their fears. Left-wing groups dismiss her as either fraudulent or misinterpreted, her words twisted to serve agendas she never endorsed. The truth, as always, is more complicated. Vanga lived in a multicultural region. Bulgaria had large Turkish and Roma populations. She worked with Muslims, Christians, atheists, Jews. Her helpers included people of different faiths and ethnicities. The xenophobia attributed to her sits uneasily with her actual life, where she welcomed everyone who came to her door. What she actually said about Europe's future is impossible to verify with precision. The sources are second-hand, recorded years after the fact, often by people with political motivations. We're left trying to reconstruct her words from fragments, knowing that each retelling changes them slightly. She predicted that by 2028, humans would begin to travel to Venus. That spacecraft would search for new energy sources there. This seems unlikely given current space program trajectories, but we're not there yet. Time will tell. She said that by 2033, the polar ice caps would melt completely. Sea levels would rise dramatically. This aligns with some climate change models, though most scientific projections place complete ice melt further in the future. Partial credit, perhaps. She foresaw that by 2046, any organ could be grown and transplanted. Medicine would conquer most diseases. Human lifespans would extend dramatically. We're making progress in this direction. Organ printing and stem cell research are advancing rapidly. She may prove correct on this one. By 2076, she said, communism would return to Europe and the world. This seems highly improbable given the trajectory of the late 20th century, but ideologies cycle in ways we don't always predict. What seemed impossible in 1995 might not seem so impossible in 2075. She predicted that by 2088, a new disease would appear that caused people to age rapidly. Within seconds, a person could grow old and die. No such disease exists in current medical literature, but prion diseases and other rapid onset conditions do cause accelerated degeneration. Perhaps she saw something that hasn't emerged yet. In 2100, she said, humanity would create an artificial sun to illuminate the dark side of the Earth. This sounds like science fiction, but we're already experimenting with fusion power and orbital mirrors. The technology isn't impossible, just very difficult. She spoke about the year 2130, when humans would make contact with alien civilizations. They would arrive with the help of beings already living underwater on Earth. This is where her prophecies move, from the plausible to the fantastical, from predictions that might be educated guesses to claims that seem like pure fantasy. By 2017, a great drought would devastate much of the planet. By 2018, a colony on Mars would demand independence from Earth. By 2018, 2 volcanic eruptions would be successfully prevented, showing humanity's new power over geological forces. The predictions continue, stretching into the distant future. By 2026, planets would change orbits, threatening Earth. By 2028, time travel would become possible, allowing contact with alien beings. By 2032, the universe's mysteries would be unlocked. She saw until the year 3005, when wars would erupt over resources on Mars and Jupiter's moons. By 3010, a comet would collide with the moon. By 3797, everything on Earth would die, forcing humans to relocate to other star systems. And then, in the year 5079, the universe itself would end. These far future predictions are obviously impossible to verify. They might be genuine visions of humanity's long-term trajectory. They might be the products of an aging woman's deteriorating mind. They might be fabrications invented by others and attributed to her after her death. We simply don't know. What we do know is that in 1996, Vanga's health finally failed completely. The years of diabetes, the stress of thousands of consultations, the weight of carrying other people's pain, all of it caught up with her. She was admitted to a hospital in Sofia in early August. The doctors tried everything they could. But at 85, her body was worn beyond repair. She developed complications. Her heart weakened. Her kidneys began to fail. On August 11th, 1996, Baba Vanga died. The woman who had supposedly foreseen the deaths of thousands had not predicted, or at least had not publicly mentioned, her own approaching end. Or had she? Her supporters claim she told her niece Krasimira exactly when she would die, down to the day. But this claim, like so many others, emerged only after the fact. The funeral was enormous. Thousands of people lined the streets of Petrich. Politicians, celebrities, common citizens who had visited her once decades ago and never forgotten the experience. They all came to pay respects. She was buried in the yard of the church of St. Petka in Rupite, near the church she had helped build with donations from grateful visitors. Her grave became an immediate pilgrimage site, drawing visitors from across Bulgaria and beyond. The Bulgarian government declared her home a national monument. Her possessions, the simple furniture and religious icons, were preserved exactly as she'd left them. Tour buses began arriving weekly, then daily, but something strange happened after her death. The predictions kept coming. New prophecies attributed to Baba Vanga appeared regularly in Bulgarian tabloids and on websites around the world. She had supposedly foreseen events that occurred years, even decades after she died. Some of these post-mortem predictions were clearly fabricated. They appeared in no contemporary sources, matched no records of her actual statements, and often reflected concerns that didn't exist in the 1990s. Social media collapse, cryptocurrency crashes, pandemics that matched COVID-19 with suspicious precision. Others might be genuine. It's possible that Vanga made hundreds of predictions that weren't recorded at the time, but were remembered and shared only later as events unfolded. Memory's unreliable, but it's not always wrong. The problem is determining which category any given prediction falls into. Without contemporaneous documentation, we're left guessing, and the incentive to fabricate is enormous. Websites that publish Baba Vanga's predictions generate massive traffic. Books claiming to reveal her lost prophecies sell thousands of copies. The dead prophet has become a profitable brand. This makes evaluating her legacy almost impossible. How do we separate the real Baba Vanga, the woman who sat in a house in Petric offering comfort to the desperate, from the myth that grew after her death? The myth that attributes to her every coincidental prediction, every vague statement that might match some future event? Consider the predictions about Barack Obama. Several websites claim Vanga predicted that the 44th president of the United States would be black and would be the last president. Neither part has proven accurate. Obama was indeed the 44th president and was black, but he wasn't the last president. Trump followed, then Biden. Her defenders argue that she meant the last effective president, that the office would lose its power after Obama. But this is the kind of post hoc rationalization that makes evaluating prophecies meaningless. If you can reinterpret a failed prediction as a successful one, then nothing can ever be proven wrong. The same pattern repeats with her prediction about Crimea. She supposedly said that Russia would reclaim Crimea and that this would lead to a great war. Russia did annex Crimea in 2014, but the Great War hasn't materialized, at least not yet. So was she right or wrong? It depends on how much time you give her, how loosely you interpret Great War, and whether you trust that she actually made the prediction in the first place. She predicted that the 45th President of the United States would face a mysterious illness and that America would suffer an economic crisis. Donald Trump did contract COVID-19. The pandemic did cause economic disruption. But was this a genuine prediction or a lucky guess? How specific does a prophecy need to be before we credit it as genuine foreknowledge? These questions don't have clear answers. What we're left with is a body of predictions, some documented, most not, some accurate, many vague, and all filtered through decades of retelling, mistranslation, and deliberate manipulation. But perhaps we're asking the wrong questions. Perhaps the obsession with verification, with proof, with distinguishing genuine precognition from fraud or coincidence misses the point entirely. Baba Vanga's real legacy isn't in whether she could actually see the future. It's in what her story tells us about human nature, about our desperate need for meaning, about our hunger for certainty in an uncertain world, about the comfort we find in believing that someone, somewhere, knows what's coming. Every culture produces figures like Vanga, Oracle at Delphi, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, Mother Shipton, Jean Dixon. The names change, the methods vary, but the function remains constant. They stand at the boundary between the known and the unknown, claiming to see what the rest of us cannot. And we want to believe them, not because we're stupid or gullible, but because the alternative, accepting that the future is genuinely unknowable, that disasters strike without warning, that our loved ones can vanish without explanation, is almost unbearable. Vanga offered something precious, not accurate predictions perhaps, but hope, the sense that someone understood, that forces existed beyond the visible world, that death wasn't the end, that missing persons might be found, that meaning could be extracted from chaos. For tens of thousands of people who visited her, the truth of her predictions mattered less than the comfort of her presence. She listened. She cared. She offered guidance when official channels had failed them. She gave them permission to hope. That's not supernatural. That's not psychic. That's profoundly human. And maybe that's enough. But there's a darker side to this story. One that reveals what happens when hope becomes industry, when comfort becomes exploitation, when the need to believe overwhelms the need for truth. Baba Vanga never asked for money. This detail appears in nearly every biographical account. She accepted gifts, food, small tokens of gratitude, but she didn't charge fees, she didn't sell merchandise, she didn't franchise her name or create a business empire around her abilities. In this respect, she stands apart from many modern psychics who've built multi-million-dollar enterprises on similar claims. Yet her legacy has been thoroughly monetized. Books bearing her name flood the market, most written decades after her death by authors who never met her. Websites claim to interpret her prophecies, selling premium memberships for access to exclusive predictions. Tours visit her former home in Rupit, now a pilgrimage site complete with gift shops and admission fees. The woman who lived simply has become a brand. This commercialization reveals something uncomfortable about how societies process extraordinary claims. Vanga herself might have been sincere. She might have genuinely believed in her abilities. She might have helped people without ulterior motives. But once she died, once she could no longer control her own narrative, the market took over. Her name became a product. Her predictions became content. Her legacy became revenue. Consider the annual January ritual. Every year, websites publish Baba Vanga's predictions for the coming year. These lists are widely shared, discussed, debated. They generate millions of clicks, substantial advertising revenue. The predictions are suitably vague. Economic troubles, natural disasters, political upheaval, things that happen somewhere in the world every single year. When something matching the prediction occurs, articles appear celebrating her accuracy. When nothing matches, the prediction is quietly forgotten or reinterpreted. It's a perfect content machine, evergreen material that requires no verification and generates endless engagement. The people profiting from this weren't there in the kitchen in Rupit. They didn't witness whatever Vanga did or didn't do. They're not preserving her legacy. They're exploiting it, using her name to sell books, drive traffic, build audiences, and there's no one left who can say, "That's not what she meant," or "She never said that," with any authority. This raises ethical questions we rarely confront. When does preserving someone's memory become profiting from their death? When does interpretation become fabrication? At what point does the public's right to access information conflict with a deceased person's right to control their own narrative? These questions extend beyond Vanga. They apply to every historical figure whose words and actions get repackaged for modern consumption. But they feel particularly acute with prophets and psychics, whose reputations rest entirely on claims that cannot be independently verified. There's also the question of harm. If someone finds comfort in reading about Vanga's predictions, even if those predictions were invented by a content marketer in 2023, is that necessarily bad? If believing that someone foresaw COVID-19 helps a person process their trauma from the pandemic, who are we to take that away? But comfort built on deception is fragile. It collapses when tested, and it prevents people from developing genuine coping mechanisms, from building resilience based on reality rather than fantasy. Worse, it creates vulnerability. People who believe in one set of extraordinary claims become targets for others. The person who accepts Vanga's prophecies without evidence might also accept medical advice from unqualified sources, investment opportunities from scammers, political promises from demagogues. Critical thinking isn't a skill you apply selectively. Once you abandon it in one domain, it weakens everywhere. The Vanga phenomenon also reveals how modern information systems amplify certain types of claims while suppressing others. A sensational prediction spreads instantly. A careful debunking reaches a fraction of the audience. The correction never catches the lie. This isn't unique to prophecy. It's how modern media works. Engagement trumps accuracy. The spectacular beats the mundane. The claim that Vanga predicted 9/11 will always travel faster than the explanation that she probably didn't. Social media algorithms optimize for emotional response, not truth. A post about Vanga's chilling predictions generates likes, shares, comments. A post explaining why those predictions are likely fabricated generates hostility, accusations of closed-mindedness, demands to prove she was wrong. The burden of proof has reversed. In a rational system, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The person making the claim must prove it. But in the attention economy, the spectacular claim is assumed true until definitively proven false. And definitive proof is impossible with historical prophecies. You can't prove Vanga didn't predict something unless you have access to every conversation she ever had. You can't prove a prediction is fabricated unless you can identify the specific moment and person who invented it. The absence of evidence becomes evidence of cover-up. Skepticism becomes conspiracy. This creates an environment where truth becomes irrelevant. What matters is the story's emotional impact, its shareability, its capacity to generate engagement. Vanga predicted the pandemic. Vanga foresaw World War III. Vanga knew about climate change. These claims circulate not because they're verified, but because they're compelling. And once they circulate widely enough, they achieve a kind of reality through consensus. If millions of people believe Vanga predicted something, does it matter whether she actually did? The belief itself becomes a social fact, shaping behavior, influencing decisions, creating consequences in the real world. This is how legends grow, not through careful documentation, but through repetition, not through evidence, but through emotion. The story that spreads is rarely the true story. It's the story people want to believe. With Vanga, we want to believe that someone saw our moment coming, that the chaos of recent years wasn't random but predictable, that patterns exist we simply haven't recognized, that if we'd listened to the blind woman in Bulgaria, we might have prepared differently. But this desire for retroactive meaning can prevent us from learning the actual lessons. COVID-19 didn't require supernatural foresight to anticipate. Epidemiologists had warned for decades that a pandemic was likely. The warnings were specific, scientific, actionable. We ignored them not because we lacked prophecy, but because we lacked political will. Climate change doesn't need a Bulgarian mystic to explain it. The physics has been understood since the 1800s. The consequences have been predicted with increasing precision since the 1970s. The problem isn't knowledge, it's action. Searching for prophecies distracts from the real work. It redirects attention from the scientists, researchers, and experts who actually can predict future trends based on data, toward mystics whose predictions are so vague they could mean anything. This matters because we're entering a period where genuine foresight is crucial. Technology is advancing exponentially. Climate systems are destabilizing. Political tensions are escalating. We desperately need to understand what's coming so we can prepare effectively. But preparation requires specificity. It requires testable predictions based on evidence. It requires experts willing to say, if X happens, then Y will follow, and here's what we should do about it. Vague prophecies about troubled times or great changes provide no actionable information. The popularity of Vanga's predictions, especially among younger generations discovering her story online, suggests a widespread anxiety about the future. People are searching for answers, for guidance, for any indication of what's coming. That's understandable. The world feels increasingly unstable. But the solution isn't to resurrect Cold War-era mystics. It's to improve our actual forecasting capabilities, to fund scientific research, to listen to expert warnings, to build systems that can respond flexibly to emerging threats. We have tools Vanga never imagined. Computer models that can simulate climate decades into the future. Epidemiological systems that can track disease spread in real time. Artificial intelligence that can identify patterns in massive data sets. These tools aren't perfect, but they're testable, improvable, based on methods we can examine and verify. Vanga's predictions offer none of these advantages. We can't test her methods because we don't know what they were. We can't improve on her accuracy because we can't measure it reliably. We can't verify her claims because the evidence has been hopelessly contaminated by decades of retelling. What we're left with is faith, and faith, whatever its value in other domains, is a poor foundation for preparing for the future. Yet the Vanga phenomenon persists. Every crisis brings new claims about what she supposedly predicted. Every disaster prompts someone to say, "Vanga warned us." The cycle continues, feeding on uncertainty and fear. Breaking this cycle requires something difficult. It requires accepting that the future is genuinely uncertain, that no one, not prophets or scientists or anyone else, can see it with perfect clarity, that the best we can do is make educated guesses based on available evidence, knowing we'll sometimes be wrong. This acceptance feels like losing something, the comfort of certainty, the hope that someone knows. But it's also liberating. If the future isn't predetermined, if no prophecy has already written our fate, then we have agency. Our choices matter. What we do now shapes what comes next. Vanga's story, stripped of supernatural claims, becomes a story about human kindness. A woman who spent decades listening to people's troubles and offering what comfort she could. Whatever else we believe about her abilities, that much seems true. She cared. The question is whether we can honour that legacy without requiring her to have been superhuman. Whether we can appreciate the comfort she provided without needing her prophecies to be real. Whether we can learn from her story without being deceived by it. The answer matters, not just for how we remember Baba Vanga, but for how we approach all the claims about supernatural knowledge that saturate our culture. Astrology, tarot, psychic hotlines, prophecy websites. The methods change, the window dressing varies, but the fundamental promise remains the same. Someone knows what you don't. Someone can see what you can't. Someone has access to information that will help you navigate uncertainty. These claims thrive because uncertainty is uncomfortable, because not knowing is hard, because when we're frightened about the future, even false certainty feels better than honest doubt. But false certainty comes at a cost. It leaves us unprepared for what actually happens. It directs our attention away from genuine warning signs. It makes us vulnerable to manipulation by anyone clever enough to tell us what we want to hear. The alternative isn't cynicism. It's not assuming everyone is lying or that nothing can be known. It's developing discernment. Learning to distinguish between claims supported by evidence and claims supported only by authority or tradition. Between predictions specific enough to be tested and prophecies vague enough to mean anything. This is harder than believing in Vanga's gifts. It requires constant vigilance, intellectual humility, willingness to be wrong. It means accepting that expertise comes from study and practice, not mystical revelation. That understanding takes work, but it's the only path to genuine knowledge, the only way to build a future based on reality rather than fantasy, the only defense against the endless stream of people claiming to know what they cannot possibly know. Baba Vanga's story will continue to circulate. New predictions will be attributed to her. New websites will emerge, claiming to interpret her words. The legend will grow, becoming more elaborate, more impressive, more distant from whatever truth it might have originally contained. That's probably inevitable. Legends don't die. They evolve, adapting to whatever people need them to mean. What we can control is our response, whether we accept claims uncritically or demand evidence, Whether we spread stories because they're compelling or pause to ask whether they're true, whether we let fear of the unknown drive us toward comfortable fiction or uncomfortable reality, the blind prophet of Rupert offered hope to thousands. That legacy deserves respect, but it doesn't require us to abandon reason. We can honor the comfort she provided while rejecting the supernatural claims made in her name. We can appreciate her kindness without believing she could see the future. That's the balance we need: compassion without credulity, openness without gullibility, hope grounded in reality rather than fantasy. Because the future is coming whether we have prophecies or not, and we'll face it better with clear eyes than with comforting illusions. So where does that leave us? Standing in a field of questions with fewer answers than we'd like. The investigation is over, the evidence examined, the legend dissected. What remains? Perhaps something more valuable than certainty, a framework for thinking about all claims of supernatural knowledge. Not just Vanga's prophecies, but every assertion that someone possesses information beyond normal human capacity. Start with the simplest question: what would genuine precognition look like? Not vague imagery subject to interpretation. Not general warnings anyone could make. Specific, verifiable, impossible to guess information about future events recorded before those events occur. Dates, names, details that couldn't be deduced from existing trends. Predictions that surprise rather than confirm what people already suspect. Information that demonstrates access to something beyond pattern recognition and lucky guessing. By that standard, we have nothing. No authenticated prediction from Vanga meets these criteria. Every claimed success either lacks documentation, contains impossible anachronisms, or describes events so general that someone somewhere will match them eventually. This matters because the burden of proof isn't on skeptics. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If someone claims to see the future, the responsibility for demonstrating that ability lies with them and their advocates. Demanding that skeptics prove the negative, that they demonstrate precognition, is impossible, reverses the proper order of inquiry. Science doesn't work by accepting every claim until proven false. It works by testing claims systematically and accepting only those supported by repeatable evidence. Precognition has been tested extensively in laboratory settings. Under controlled conditions, with proper protocols, no one has demonstrated the ability reliably. That doesn't mean the future is completely unknowable. We make successful predictions constantly. Weather forecasts, economic projections, epidemiological models. These work because they're based on understanding causal mechanisms, collecting relevant data, and calculating probabilities. The difference between prediction and prophecy is methodology. Predictions show their work. They explain what information they're based on and how conclusions were reached. They quantify uncertainty. They improve over time as models are refined and data accumulates. Prophecies offer none of this. They present conclusions without justification. They resist testing. They claim certainty while providing only ambiguity. When they fail, explanations emerge about misinterpretation or incomplete understanding. When they succeed, it's presented as confirmation of supernatural ability rather than coincidence. Consider how this plays out in practice. Every day, millions of people make predictions about future events. Most are wrong. Some are right by chance. A few are right because the predictor had genuine insight or information. If we only remember the correct predictions and forget the failures, anyone can seem prophetic. This is selection bias, and it's how legendary reputations are built. Vanga made thousands of statements to thousands of visitors over decades. Even with a low success rate, that generates plenty of material for a legend. Add motivated reasoning from people who want to believe, embellishment through retelling, and the natural tendency to fit events to prophecies rather than prophecies to events, and you have a perfect recipe for a reputation that vastly exceeds the reality. None of this requires malice. People genuinely remember things differently than they occurred. Memories are reconstructive, not reproductive. Each time we recall an event, we slightly alter it. Over years, those alterations compound. Someone who visited Vanga in 1970 and recalls the meeting in 2000 isn't necessarily lying if their memory has changed. They might sincerely believe she predicted something she never said, especially if they've spent 30 years hearing others describe similar predictions. This is why documentation matters, why contemporary records trump later recollections, why we should be skeptical of claims that can't be verified against objective evidence created at the time. The Vanga literature fails this test comprehensively. The books were written after her death by authors with financial and reputational stakes in her legend. The predictions they contain weren't recorded before the events they supposedly foretold. Many contradict earlier sources or describe events in ways Vanga couldn't have. What's left is a cultural phenomenon, a story people tell because it serves psychological and social functions, because it provides comfort, generates revenue, or reinforces existing beliefs about the world. That's not unique to Vanga. Every culture produces figures like her, seers, prophets, oracles, who supposedly bridge the gap between known and unknown. The specifics vary, but the pattern repeats. Sometimes these figures are deliberately fraudulent, sometimes they're self-deceived, sometimes they're genuine helpers misremembered as having powers they never claimed. Often it's complicated, a mixture of sincerity, self-delusion, and strategic ambiguity that resists simple categorization. What matters isn't judging Vanga personally. She's beyond judgment now. What matters is how we respond to claims made in her name and similar claims that will continue emerging. Because this isn't really about one blind woman in Bulgaria. It's about how we evaluate evidence, how we distinguish signal from noise, how we protect ourselves from manipulation while remaining open to genuine insight. The tools for this already exist. They're not mysterious or complicated. Ask what evidence supports a claim. Ask whether that evidence is documented. Ask whether alternative explanations are more plausible. Ask what would change your mind. These questions aren't hostile. They're respectful. They take claims seriously enough to examine them properly, rather than accepting them uncritically or dismissing them without consideration. Applied to Vanga, they reveal a legend built on foundations that can't support the weight placed on them. That doesn't make her evil or her followers stupid. It makes the situation normal. Humans generate legends. Always have. Always will. The question is whether we recognize them as legends or mistake them for history. Whether we learn from the pattern or repeat it endlessly. Right now, someone somewhere is being told they have prophetic gifts. Someone is building a following based on vague predictions that will later be reinterpreted as specific. Someone is creating the next legend. Decades from now, people will debate whether that person really could see the future. They'll collect anecdotes, share stories, write books. The process will repeat, unless we learn. Unless we insist on documentation before accepting claims. Unless we maintain healthy skepticism while remaining open to evidence. That balance is difficult. Easier to believe everything or trust nothing. Easier to accept claims from authorities we like and reject claims from those we don't. Easier to let emotion guide us than to think carefully about what evidence actually demonstrates. But easy isn't the same as wise, and comfortable isn't the same as true. The future will contain surprises, events no one predicted, outcomes that seem obvious only in retrospect. That's guaranteed. What's not guaranteed is whether we'll face those surprises prepared or unprepared. Believing in prophecies feels like preparation. It creates the illusion of control, the sense that someone knows what's coming. But it's false preparation. It directs attention toward imagined scenarios while real threats go unnoticed. Real preparation means understanding what can actually be predicted and what can't. It means developing systems that respond flexibly to uncertainty rather than assuming we know what's ahead. It means building resilience instead of seeking certainty, none of which requires supernatural knowledge, all of which requires clear thinking about what we actually know and how we know it. That's the alternative to prophecy. Not ignorance or helplessness, but honest assessment of uncertainty combined with practical preparation for multiple possibilities. It's less dramatic than believing someone sees the future, but it works better, and working better is what matters when the future arrives. So perhaps the real lesson of Baba Vanga isn't about her at all. It's about us, about why we create these stories and what we get from believing them, about the space between comfort and truth, between wanting to know and actually knowing. She became what people needed her to be, a source of hope during dark times, a connection to something beyond ordinary experience, a reassurance that someone understood the chaos. Those needs were real, they remain real, but meeting them through fantasy rather than reality carries costs we can't ignore. Every minute spent believing in false prophecies is a minute not spent understanding actual risks. Every resource directed towards supernatural claims is a resource unavailable for genuine solutions. Every decision based on imagined futures is a decision not based on actual evidence. The costs accumulate slowly. They're easy to ignore individually, but collectively they shape how societies respond to real challenges, how we prepare for disasters, how we evaluate expert advice, how we distinguish between legitimate warnings and profitable fear-mongering. These aren't abstract concerns. They have concrete consequences. People make real decisions based on prophecies. They relocate, they invest, they panic or relax depending on what they believe is coming. When those beliefs are unfounded, the results are predictable. Resources misallocated, opportunities missed, dangers overlooked because attention was focused elsewhere. This is the harm that comfortable legends create. Not intentional evil, but systematic misdirection. A pattern of thought that prioritizes feeling right over being right. Breaking that pattern requires rejecting the false choice between cynicism and credulity. We don't have to believe nothing to avoid believing everything. We can hold space for uncertainty without filling it with fantasy. That's harder than it sounds. Uncertainty feels like emptiness. The urge to fill it with something, anything, is powerful. Prophecies offer to fill it with certainty, even false certainty. Resisting that urge means accepting discomfort, means admitting we don't know what we wish we knew, means making decisions without guarantees about outcomes. But it also means making better decisions. Decisions based on reality rather than imagination. Decisions that account for multiple possibilities rather than assuming one predetermined future. That's the trade. Comfort for accuracy, certainty for truth, reassuring stories for useful knowledge. Most people, given that choice explicitly, would choose truth. But the choice is rarely explicit. It's buried in how we evaluate claims, what sources we trust, which questions we ask. The Vanga legend persists because people don't see it as a choice. They encounter stories that seem compelling, testimony that appears sincere, and they accept it without examining the underlying evidence. Not because they're foolish, but because skepticism requires effort. Because checking sources is tedious. Because rejecting comforting beliefs feels like losing something valuable. All of which is understandable. None of which changes what's actually true. So we return to where we started. A blind woman in a Bulgarian village who offered comfort to thousands, who may or may not have possessed unusual insight, who became, after death, something far larger than she was in life. The legend will survive this investigation. Legends always do. Facts are no match for stories people need to believe. But for those willing to look, the evidence tells a different story. One about human nature, about how legends form, about the difference between what we know and what we wish we knew. That story is less magical, but it's more useful, because understanding how legends work protects us from being deceived by them. And in a world full of people claiming special knowledge, that protection matters more than ever. The future is coming. That's the one prophecy we can make with absolute certainty. How we face it, with clear eyes or comforting illusions, will determine outcomes more than any prediction ever could. Baba Vanga can't help us with that choice. No prophet can. It's ours alone to make. The woman who supposedly saw everything failed to see the most important thing: that her legacy would be hijacked, that her name would sell books she never wrote, that prophecies she never made would be attributed to her for profit, that decades after her death she'd become exactly what she spent her life not being: a commodity. Walk through Rupert today and you'll find tour buses, gift shops selling crystals and incense, guided tours of her home, now carefully preserved behind velvet ropes, visitors taking selfies at her grave. The place where a blind woman once offered comfort has become a tourist attraction. The spiritual has become commercial. The personal has become performance. This transformation tells us something crucial about how societies process the extraordinary. We can't just let things be. We have to categorize, monetize, systematize. We take the ambiguous and make it certain. We take the personal and make it public. We take the dead and make them into whatever we need them to be. Vanga never wrote a book, never gave a television interview, never created a website predicting world events. She sat in a room and talked to people. That was it. Everything else, the global phenomenon, the annual predictions, the breathless articles about what she supposedly foresaw, all of that came after, built by others, for reasons that had nothing to do with her. And yet people continue believing, not because the evidence is strong. It isn't. Not because the predictions are specific, they're not. They believe because believing serves a function that evidence cannot. When you're anxious about the future, when the world feels unstable and unpredictable, the idea that someone saw it coming is deeply reassuring. It means the chaos has order. It means someone understood. It means we're not alone in the dark. That need is real. That need is human. But meeting it with fantasy has consequences. Because here's what happens when prophecy replaces preparation. You stop listening to experts. Why pay attention to climate scientists when a Bulgarian mystic already told you what's coming? Why worry about pandemic preparedness when someone predicted it decades ago? The prophecy becomes an excuse for inaction. We knew it was coming. We were warned. Nothing we could have done. Except that's exactly backward. The scientists didn't need supernatural insight. They did the work. They studied patterns. They built models. They issued warnings that were specific, actionable, and ignored, not because the warnings weren't there, but because warnings without prophecy don't feel dramatic enough to matter. We paid attention to the mystic who predicted troubled times. We ignored the researchers who said, "Here's what will happen if we don't change course, and here's what we should do about it." One felt spiritual, the other felt like homework. Guess which one spread further? This is the real danger of the Vanga phenomenon. Not that people believe a blind woman could see the future. That's relatively harmless superstition. The danger is that it trains us to value spectacle over substance, mystery over methodology, claims over evidence. It teaches us that knowledge comes from revelation rather than research. That understanding arrives fully formed rather than being built piece by piece. That the hard work of actually learning how the world works can be bypassed by consulting someone who just knows. That lesson, applied broadly, creates a society of people waiting for answers instead of looking for them, expecting profits instead of developing expertise, believing what sounds impressive instead of what can be demonstrated. We see it everywhere now, not just in prophecy, but in how people evaluate information generally. Does it feel right? Does it confirm what I already believe? Does it come from someone who seems authoritative? Then it must be true. The actual evidence, the methodology, the alternative explanations, those are details for people who don't understand that truth is felt, not proven. This is what happens when we prioritize comfort over accuracy for too long. We lose the ability to tell the difference. We start thinking that our conviction about something is evidence for it. That if enough people believe a claim, it must have merit. That passionate testimony outweighs careful analysis. And we become vulnerable to anyone who understands how to tell us what we want to hear, who can speak with certainty about uncertain things, who offers simple answers to complex questions. The people profiting from Vanga's legend understand this perfectly. They're not preserving her memory, they're exploiting a market. Every January, they publish predictions for the coming year. Every crisis, they reveal what she supposedly foresaw. Every disaster, they explain how she warned us. It's profitable because it's unfalsifiable, vague enough to match anything, dramatic enough to spread, and immune to correction because the prophet is dead and can't clarify what she actually meant. This should bother us more than it does, not just because it's dishonest, though it is, but because it represents a broader pattern of how information flows in modern systems. The spectacular beats the mundane. The mysterious beats the understood. The claim that can never be disproven spreads faster than the claim that shows its work. We've built information architectures that reward exactly the wrong things: engagement over accuracy, emotion over evidence, the story that generates clicks over the story that generates understanding. And we're all complicit. Everyone who shares a Baba Vanga predicted this article without checking sources. Everyone who repeats a prophecy because it's compelling without asking whether it's documented. Everyone who lets the desire for patterns override the need for proof. We do this because it's easier, because critical thinking is work, because checking sources is tedious, because accepting that we don't know something feels worse than believing we do. But easy isn't the same as wise, and comfortable isn't the same as true. The alternative requires something difficult. It requires accepting genuine uncertainty, not the fake uncertainty of we can't prove she was wrong, but the real uncertainty of we simply don't know what's coming, and anyone claiming otherwise is guessing. That acceptance feels like losing something, the comfort of believing someone has answers, the hope that the chaos has meaning, the sense that we're not fumbling blindly through existence. But here's what we gain: agency. If the future isn't predetermined, if no prophecy has already written what comes next, then our choices actually matter. What we do now shapes what happens later. We're not passengers watching predetermined events unfold. We're participants affecting outcomes. That's more empowering than any prophecy, more useful than any prediction, because it means we can prepare without knowing exactly what's coming. We can build resilience without requiring certainty. We can respond to actual conditions rather than imagined scenarios. This is what expertise actually offers. Not prophecy, but probability. Not certainty, but informed analysis. Not revelation, but methodology that can be examined, challenged, and improved. Climate scientists can't tell you exactly what temperature it'll be on August 3rd, 2045, but they can tell you that if emissions continue at current rates, certain consequences become likely. They can quantify uncertainty. They can explain their reasoning. They can update their models as new data arrives. That's not as dramatic as prophecy. It's better, because it's useful, but it requires us to value the right things, to prioritize understanding over mystery, to accept that the experts who show their work are more trustworthy than the mystics who claim to just know. The Vanga legend persists because we haven't made that shift culturally. We still value the spectacular over the substantive. We still give more attention to prophecies than projections. We still treat conviction as evidence. Changing that requires individual choices: what sources we trust, what claims we repeat, what standards we apply before accepting something as true. It requires asking questions: where did this prediction originate? Who documented it? and when? What would it look like if this claim were false? What alternative explanations exist? These aren't hostile questions, they're respectful. They take claims seriously enough to examine them properly. Applied consistently, they create immunity to manipulation. Not perfect immunity. Humans are too complicated for that. But enough to make a difference. Enough to slow the spread of false certainty. Enough to create space for actual knowledge. That space is where progress happens. Where problems get solved. Where understanding accumulates over time. Prophecy offers none of that. It offers only the illusion of knowledge. The comfort of certainty without the work of verification. And we deserve better. Better than legends built on selective memory and commercial exploitation. Better than predictions that can never be proven wrong because they were never specific enough to be right. Better than a system that rewards mystery over methodology. Baba Vanga, the actual woman, deserves better too. To be remembered for what she actually did rather than what people claim she did. To be appreciated for the comfort she provided rather than supernatural powers she may never have possessed. She spent decades listening to desperate people, offering what help she could, living simply, taking no payment. That's worth remembering. That's worth honouring. But it doesn't require believing she could see the future. It doesn't require accepting every claim made in her name. It doesn't require abandoning critical thinking out of respect for her memory. We can hold both truths simultaneously, that she was kind, that she helped people, and that the legend built around her after death has become something she never was. A prophet whose predictions were specific, an oracle who was never wrong, a seer who foresaw our moments with perfect clarity. That legend serves purposes that have nothing to do with her. It sells books, it generates traffic, it provides comfort to people anxious about uncertainty. It creates revenue for people skilled at exploiting that anxiety. But it doesn't serve truth, and ultimately, truth matters more than comfort. Because the future is coming regardless. Prophecy won't stop it. Belief won't change it. Hope won't alter it. What might alter it is clear thinking, honest assessment of risks, preparation based on evidence rather than revelation, decisions made with full awareness of uncertainty rather than false confidence in predetermined outcomes. That's the choice before us. Not whether Baba Vanga could see the future. That question is ultimately unanswerable with available evidence. The choice is whether we face our future with clarity or delusion, with evidence or prophecy, with the humility to admit what we don't know or the arrogance to claim certainty we haven't earned. The world needs more critical thinking, not less. More skepticism, not less. More willingness to question claims, especially claims that sound appealing. It needs fewer legends about people who supposedly knew. More respect for people who actually know, who built their knowledge through study and evidence rather than mystical revelation. That's not a rejection of mystery. The universe contains plenty we don't understand. Genuine mysteries worth exploring with rigorous methods and open minds. But the mystery of Baba Vanga isn't one of them. It's a case study in how legends form, how selective memory and commercial exploitation can transform a person into a symbol that bears little resemblance to reality. Understanding that process is more valuable than believing the legend, because the process repeats. New prophets emerge constantly. New claims about supernatural knowledge circulate daily. New legends are being built right now. Learning to recognize the pattern protects us from being deceived, not perfectly, but enough to ask better questions, to demand better evidence, to distinguish between genuine insights and profitable fiction. That's what we take from this investigation. Not proof that prophecy is impossible, not certainty that Vanga was fraud, but tools for thinking clearly about extraordinary claims. Tools that apply far beyond one Bulgarian woman's story. Tools that help us navigate a world saturated with claims about hidden knowledge. Tools that create space for actual understanding rather than comforting illusion. The starry heavens above and the moral law within, Kant's famous phrase inscribed on his tomb. He believed these two things filled the mind with wonder, the vastness of the cosmos and the sense of moral duty. Both can be approached with reason, both can be understood through careful thought. Neither requires abandoning critical inquiry or accepting claims without evidence. Vanga's tomb in Rupiti has no such inscription, just her name and dates. Born 1911, died 1996. 85 years of life, reduced to a dash between two numbers. What filled that dash? A childhood marked by loss, an accident that took her sight, decades of consultations with desperate people, kindness offered freely, comfort provided without charge, and after death, a legend, growing larger each year, more elaborate, more distant from whatever truth it originally contained. The dash between those dates contained a human life, complicated, limited, shaped by circumstance and choice. The legend that followed contained something else entirely, a projection of our needs, a mirror of our anxieties, a product designed to generate revenue and provide reassurance. Understanding the difference matters, not just for how we remember one blind woman, but for how we approach truth itself. Because if we can't distinguish between person and legend, between documented facts and profitable fiction, between what actually happened and what we wish had happened, then we're vulnerable to every claim that promises certainty about uncertain things. And those claims are everywhere, growing more sophisticated, more targeted, more effective at exploiting our psychological needs. The defense against them isn't cynicism. It's not assuming everyone lies or nothing can be known. The defense is developing discernment, learning to ask the right questions, insisting on evidence before accepting extraordinary claims, maintaining healthy skepticism while remaining open to genuine insight. That balance is difficult. It requires constant effort. It means sometimes admitting you don't know when you wish you did. It means accepting uncertainty when certainty would be more comfortable. But it's the only path to genuine understanding, the only way to build knowledge that's actually reliable, the only defense against the endless stream of people claiming to know what they cannot possibly know. Baba Vanga's story is finished. The investigation is complete. The evidence has been examined. The legend exposed for what it is. What remains is the choice each person makes when encountering claims about supernatural knowledge, whether to accept them uncritically or examine them carefully, whether to spread them because they're compelling or pause to ask whether they're true. That choice, made millions of times by millions of people, shapes the information environment we all inhabit. It determines whether truth or fiction spreads faster, whether evidence or emotion guides decisions, whether we build a future on reality or fantasy. The woman in Rupiti offered what comfort she could. That was enough. That was valuable. That's worth remembering. Everything else, the prophecies, the predictions, the claims about supernatural sight, those are what came after. Built by others, for purposes she never chose. We can honour her actual legacy without accepting the legend. We can appreciate her kindness without believing she could see tomorrow. That's the resolution, not proof, not certainty, just a clearer understanding of what actually happened and what was invented later, and the knowledge that when the next prophet emerges, when the next set of predictions circulates, when the next legend begins to form, we'll have tools for thinking clearly about it. Tools that won't eliminate uncertainty. Nothing can do that, but tools that help us navigate uncertainty without surrendering to comfortable delusion. The future is coming. No one knows exactly what it holds. Anyone claiming otherwise is selling something. That's the only prophecy worth believing, and it doesn't require a blind woman in Bulgaria to deliver it. Just honest observation of how the world actually works.